Howdy, howdy, howdy. We're talking topic 6 and 7 that's on these slides, but for this video, we're only going to be talking about topic 6. And in topic 6, we're going to be talking about 3 extremely important systems in our bodies that are essential to our survival. Our essential questions, what you should be able to answer by the end of this topic. What is the structure and function of each of these systems? Your digestive system, which we have a little model here, respiratory system, circulatory system. And lastly, how do the digestive, respiratory, and circulatory systems work together in order to provide food and oxygen to all of the body's tissues? Okay, so review. What are the 5 functions that must be met if we are to classify something as an organism? In other words, if I look at something and say, hey, is it alive or not? It needs to meet these 5 functions. Okay, so we should know these. If you want to pause and think about it for a second, probably a good idea. And they are, boom, these, of course. We need to grow, we need to produce waste, we have to adapt to the environment, we have to reproduce, and we require energy. Notice, movement isn't one of those because trees and fungi and mushrooms, these are organisms, and yet they don't move manually. They're not able to move on their own. Okay, so movement isn't necessarily something, a function rather, an organism needs to have. Okay, moving on. We're going to first dig into the digestive system. Okay, pause. What's the function? Ask yourself, like, what's the job of the digestive system? Okay. Also talk about, like, what structures, what organs are in the digestive system. So go ahead and pause the video. Think about it for a second. You might surprise yourself with how much you already know. Okay. So the function of the digestive system is to metabolize food. Okay. And that word metabolize, it's a fancy word, right? Essentially what it means is to break down food into its smaller parts. In those smaller parts, not only do we get energy, but we also get essential nutrients we need to build our body and so that our body can function. Okay. Notice one of the highlighted words here is absorbed. You're going to hear that word a lot in this topic, absorption or to be absorbed. Okay. And remember what we learned in topic 4 about diffusion. Okay. Fluids and particles want to diffuse from high to low concentration. And that's something that's going to come up several times as we talk through this topic. Structures, okay. Ingested or eaten, ingested means eaten, food passes through these organs in this order. And we can even see it in this GIF over here, right? Fella eats the food through his mouth. It goes down his food tube, which is actually called your esophagus, okay? Esophagus or esophagus. So food travels down the esophagus, enters the stomach, which is kind of hard to see, but there it is right there, okay? In the stomach, naturally occurring acids essentially boil and break down whatever it is you ate into a paste. And that paste travels into your small intestine. And as it goes around and around and around your intestine, of which you have about 20 feet, believe it or not, it's all coiled up kind of like a rope. Nutrients from that food paste are absorbed into the bloodstream. And as that food paste goes around, 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 eventually it enters the large intestine. And at this point, there are still some nutrients that will be absorbed, but most of them have already been absorbed thanks to the small intestine. As the food paste goes through the large intestine, what is absorbed mostly is water. So water gets reabsorbed back into the body, and whatever was part of your food that couldn't be digested exits your body through your rectum, out of your anus, and yeah, that's poop. Okay. Now, you might be thinking like, well, if I eat something, shouldn't I be able to digest all of it? Well, I mean, ideally, yes, but not all food is made up of nutrients, essentially, that can be digested. Fiber. I'm sure you guys have heard about fiber. Fiber is a form of a carbohydrate that can't be broken down, okay? It's important for our health to have a high fiber diet because it helps clean out your digestive system. It's important to have that fiber in your diet. If you were to eat something that's, not food, like, I don't know, a paperclip or something, you better hope it doesn't get stuck somewhere. It probably would get stuck, a paperclip. But if it didn't, obviously it wouldn't be broken down it wouldn't be absorbed into your bloodstream. It would hopefully pass through your body. Probably not. You'd probably need surgery in that case. Okay, this looks like a really good matching question for a test. Hint, hint, hint. Okay, these are all the organs in the digestive system. And it's important to understand that this order, okay, you can imagine food enters through your mouth, then the esophagus, then the stomach, then the small intestine, then the large intestine, then the rectum, then out of your anus. That's the order of food passing through your body. So it's important to understand that as well. And we can see it in this GIF here too. Buddy chews, food goes down the esophagus, through the stomach, around to the small intestine, out of the large intestine, and it's a pile of poo. Moving on. So mouth, obviously, like this one's pretty straightforward. Buddy's eating a piece of pizza, using his teeth, using his jaw muscles, chewing, breaking it down into smaller parts that not only are able to be swallowed so you don't choke, but it'll also allow you to digest it easier, right? Smaller parts are easier to digest, okay? Notice down here, I think this is really cool. In the front, you have your trachea. We'll talk about that in a minute, okay? And your trachea is your windpipe. It's where you breathe to your lungs. Behind it, that's your esophagus. So essentially, you have two tubes here. And I always wondered, and so I was taught, I always wondered, like, how do, like when I swallow my pizza, why doesn't it go down into my lungs? Why doesn't it go down my windpipe? You have this little flap of tissue here called, let me look it up. It's called your epiglottis. I just wanted to double check and make sure I was reading it right. Your epiglottis, okay? And it's essentially like a trap door. Notice as you swallow, the food comes and pushes it closed so that the food doesn't seep down into your windpipe or your trachea. Amazing design, right? If we don't have this structure, our food would go down to our lungs and we would asphyxiate. We wouldn't get the oxygen we need to survive. So pretty darn cool. Do you need to know that for the test? No, you don't. I just thought that was kind of cool. Okay, here's a better look at it. Okay, food's chewed, epiglottis closes, not allowing it to go down into your windpipe. Food travels down your esophagus. Something else, you don't need to know this for the test, but I think it's kind of cool. Your mouth also naturally secretes saliva, which is really important for one, you want to be comfortable, sucks having a dry mouth. But two, that saliva helps you chew the food, helps you break it down. I don't know if you've ever tried eating something with a dry mouth, but it's pretty darn hard. Take a spoonful of cinnamon, you'll see. Esophagus, that's the next part of our digestive system, okay? It's your food tube, okay? You chew, it goes down your esophagus, okay? Here's another look at it. Travels down into your stomach. It's just a big long hose. And you can see here, really briefly, the stomach acid that's in your stomach, of which we'll talk about right now. Okay, so food travels down your esophagus, lands in your stomach, and it starts to get dissolved by acid. And I think that's just really cool. You know, like when I think of acid, I think of like a mad scientist burning something. But it's not just that. We have natural acid pits inside of us. And that acid is so important because if without it, our food wouldn't be able to be broken down into smaller parts and our nutrients wouldn't be able to be absorbed when they enter our intestines. Something else that happens in your stomach, and you probably already know this because you felt it, but your stomach has smooth muscle and it'll naturally move itself around, further helping break down that swallowed food. You can also see the liver right here. You don't need to know this for the test, but this is the liver, and it helps provide the stomach acid and enzymes that help facilitate the breaking down of food. Okay, again, another look. Food has been broken down, and you can see it's kind of a disgusting paste. If you've ever vomited, you'll know what this looks like, okay? It's traveling down into the small intestine, which we'll talk about right this second, okay? So small intestine, it's really easy to confuse that with a large intestine. The small intestine kind of looks like it's bigger, right? Like it's taking up more area. The way you can remember it is the diameter of the tubes. You can see that the diameter of the small intestine is a lot smaller than the diameter of the large intestine, okay? And again, as I said earlier, the job of the small intestine, as the food goes around and around and around and around and around and around and around for about 20 feet, like you have 20 feet of small intestine. As the food goes around your very long small intestine, nutrients are being absorbed into the bloodstream. And that's really important, and you'll see why in a few minutes here. but nutrients get absorbed into the bloodstream in the small intestine. Don't worry about jejunum, duodenum, ileum. Don't worry about that. It's important, but you'll learn more about that in high school. You don't need to know it for the test. Okay, another look at it. And this is actually important. The small intestine breaks the food down into its 3 different types of macronutrients. So that would be your protein, your carbohydrates, and your fats. And it actually further breaks them down. Proteins get turned into amino acids, fats get turned into fatty acid chains, and carbohydrates get broken down into mono and polysaccharides. Carbohydrates that can't be broken down, that's the fiber I was talking about before. Inside your small intestine, you have something called villi, and that's a plural, okay? So like all of these little finger-looking thingies, we would say that's a whole bunch of villi. Now this is zoomed in big time, okay? It's on the inside of your small intestine, and if you're kind of grossed out by it, yeah, me too. It's kind of disgusting to think we have this inside us. But even if we think it's gross, it is so important because this is where the nutrients diffuse into our bloodstream. So imagine that food paste is traveling through the small intestine. And as it does, okay, nutrients from that food paste naturally osmote into blood vessels. Not osmote, sorry, they diffuse, pardon me. They diffuse into the bloodstream. Okay, so your sugars, your fatty acid chains, your amino acids, they're diffusing into the bloodstream. And once those nutrients are in the bloodstream, they're able to be transported to other tissues in the body, which then use those nutrients. So one way you can think of this is kind of like a cargo truck. We've all seen them on the highway, right? Maybe going to McDonald's or Walmart or whatever, transporting some kind of goods, okay? The goods that are being transported right now are the nutrients, and they get loaded up onto a truck that goes on the highway. And our blood vessels are kind of like a highway. And the cargo trucks drive down the highway and they make stops and deliver the goods or the products, okay? And that would be like the other tissues. So essentially like a truck making deliveries, that's what your blood does. It's delivering nutrients. And without those nutrients, tissues die. You know, like I'm sure someone's told you once in your life, don't put an elastic band around your finger. It's bad for it. It is bad for it because you're cutting off the flow of blood and therefore you're cutting off the flow of nutrients. And if you leave that rubber band on your finger long enough, your tissue dies. It goes necrotic and it dies. Here's another look at it. Okay, so food is being broken down, nutrients are being absorbed in the small intestine, and we can see this graphic how it's being absorbed into the bloodstream. Bloodstream moves those nutrients around the body. Okay, another look at it. Nutrients are being absorbed into the villi, which in turn goes into the bloodstream. Okay, this is in your notes. So is that. Make sure you put that in. And of course, you've got your follow-along notes in front of you. Absolutely, you should be filling in those notes. If you didn't, I guess you can just go back and reset. Next, food passes from the small intestine into the large intestine. This one right here, okay? Now this one doesn't coil up and it's not like a big tangle. It goes up and around, kind of like almost making a square kind of shape here, okay? And as I mentioned earlier, as that food paste is traveling through here, some nutrients are being absorbed. Most of them are absorbed during the small intestine. And mainly what's being absorbed here is water. Here's another look at it. Food's going up and around, and as it does, water is being absorbed. Okay, another look at it. Food travels from the small intestine to the large intestine, or colon. A lot of people call the small intestine colon, which is fine. Okay, just so be aware that colon and large intestine mean the same thing. Okay, we can see here kind of grossly actually, the food is passed all the way through. A lot of the water's been absorbed, and what you're left with is that fibrous waste that couldn't be absorbed, which of course is feces or poop or other words that we're all aware of. And lastly, guys, the rectum and anus, these are a part of the large intestine. The rectum is right here, and this is where feces are stored until it's time to go hit the washroom. Okay, so when you're, not ready to go do your thing, this is where your feces are stored. Okay, and finally, when you do go and defecate, it passes through the anus. Okay, so rectum and anus aren't the same thing. Rectum is really that last 6 to 10 inches of large intestine. Anus is the very exit. All right. Now, I'm not going to watch this whole video because you're not going to be able to hear. You're not going to be able to hear the audio on it. You need to watch this on your own. And it's really cool. It shows how when you eat an aspirin or like a Tylenol or ibuprofen, okay, how it gets absorbed into your body. So there it is. It's dropped. It's eaten. Obviously, it wasn't swallowed or chewed. You swallow it. It's being dissolved by the stomach acid right now. Now that it's dissolved, it's in smaller particles. Now it's traveling through the small intestine, and we can see all the villi here. And the villi are absorbing these aspirin particles. And as the aspirin particles are absorbed, they're going to be absorbed into the bloodstream, which then, just like a cargo truck, and here we see it. Here are these are capillaries. We'll talk about that later. But the aspirin particles are being absorbed into these blood vessels, which are now transporting them around the whole body. And this is why when you eat an aspirin, it takes a little while for it to work. It's not instantaneous, okay? It takes a second, and this is why. It's a process. The particles have to be absorbed into the bloodstream through the villi. And then, once they're absorbed, it takes a while for it to circulate throughout your entire body. And that's what happens not only with like aspirin. This is what happens with food, too. The food particles are broken down, and they are absorbed into the bloodstream, which are then transported around the body. Okay, another video here for you. It's about 10 minutes long, I think. Great video, okay? Covers a lot of important information, a lot of information that we don't really need, for grade 8 science, but it's interesting nonetheless. Make sure you're paying attention to the stuff we have covered so far in this topic. There you go. You will watch that on your own time. Make sure you watch it. If you don't watch it, it's pretty hard to expect to, know what you're doing. Next, respiratory system. Okay, pause the video. See if you can guess what the function is of the respiratory system. See if you know what structures are involved. I mean, there's a picture there. We don't need to know all of these specific ones, but what are the structures within a respiratory system? So pause it, see if you can guess. And we're back. Boom, function is to move fresh air into your body and out of your body. I mean, that's kind of common sense, right? We're all breathing right now. At least I sure hope so. To be a bit more specific, though, when we're breathing that air in, what we're doing is we're doing something called a gas exchange. We're absorbing oxygen and we're excreting carbon dioxide. So it's a trade. We're trading the carbon dioxide from our body for new, fresh oxygen. We want the oxygen. We want to get rid of the carbon dioxide. Okay. And actually, I've got a mistake here, guys. Let me just go ahead and back out and fix this. This should say navel and oral cavity. Sorry about that. Got to proofread. My bad. There we go. So these are the structures. And just like with the digestive system, I've organized them in order of how the air enters your body. Okay. So navel and oral cavity, fancy way of saying your mouth and your nose. Okay. There's a lot of different parts in your navel and oral cavities, but you don't really need to know. That's okay. Okay. Just know that navel means nose, oral means mouth. You breathe through your nose and your mouth, unless you're like me and you're a mouth breather. Okay. Next, moving on. Air passes through your cavities, down through your larynx. Okay. Now your larynx does a lot of different jobs, but for our purposes, what we need to know is one, this is where air is moistened. Okay, so like saliva and water starts to moisten that air, which is important for it when it gets down to the lungs. Okay, and secondly, and you don't need to know this for the test, but this is where your voice box is, or your vocal cords. Okay. Anyhow, air is traveling through the larynx and down through the trachea. Okay, you can see, this is how it looks like on the outside. Here is as if it was cut, so we can see the inside of it. Okay, these little rings, they're not bone. They're cartilage, okay? And in your trachea, air is also being moistened as it's traveling towards your lungs. Air travels down the trachea, and then it branches off into two main branches. And we don't call these branches, we call them bronchi. So right there, bronchi. So two main branches. I like to think it's kind of like a tree. Like if we were to do this. Let me see if I can just move this here. If we were to do this, flip this guy upside down, you can kind of see how it looks like a tree, right? Here's the trunk and then two big branches. Makes sense in my brain. Okay, so anyway, air is coming down the trachea. It's going into each bronchi. And notice each bronchi goes into each lung. And as we go through the bronchi, it splits up into many, many, many little smaller branches that we would call bronchioles. And they get progressively smaller. Again, just like a tree, right? Tree has two big branches, and then they go smaller branches, and then tiny, tiny little branches. Very similar, okay? And as these bronchioles get smaller and smaller, they end up at the end of them with little tiny sacs called alveoli. Okay, and these are really important. We'll take a better look at these in a second. Here's a different GIF just showing how the air comes in. Gas exchange happens, we get the oxygen, we push out carbon dioxide. You don't need to know this for the test, but you see this muscle right here? This is called your diaphragm. If you've ever been punched in the gut or like you landed on your back and you've had the wind knocked out of you, that's when your diaphragm is basically spasming and it's making it hard for it to flex and help your lungs push air in and out. And that's why when you get the wind knocked out of you, it's really hard to breathe because your diaphragm isn't making your lungs inhale and exhale. Again, another one. Air comes in, it's full of oxygen. Awesome, we need it. It's traveling down through the larynx, down the trachea, down one of the bronchis. Bronchus is singular. Goes into all the little bronchioles, and then hits an alveoli, which I'm going to get to in a second here. I'm going to come back to this in a second. I just want to find... Okay, bronchioli. They are at the end of the bronchioles. And the way it makes sense in my, like, just to remember what they look like, I think they look kind of like grapes on the end of a stem of grapes, okay? And these alveoli are so darn important because this is where gas exchange happens. Oxygen-rich air comes down the bronchioli into an alveoli, and we can see how the oxygen is diffusing from the alveoli into your bloodstream. So just like nutrients from food were absorbed into your bloodstream in the small intestine, same thing's happening here except with oxygen. Oxygen is diffusing into your bloodstream in the alveoli. And as the oxygen goes into the blood, carbon dioxide leaves the blood and goes into your alveoli, back through your bronchioles, back up the bronchi, back up your trachea, and out of your mouth. So it essentially, in with the oxygen, out with the carbon dioxide. Kind of cool. Now I'm just going to back up here. Okay. Do you need to know every single one of these words? Absolutely not. No way. When you go to anatomy class in college, if you choose to, that's when you can worry about that. For now, nope, you don't need to. You need to worry about these organs and structures. Okay, and again, as I said earlier, these are in order. Air travels through your cavities, down your larynx, down your trachea, down your bronchi, through your bronchioles, into your alveoli. And then the air reverses and it comes back out. So it's essentially a cycle doing this. Notice here, blood vessels, don't be tricked. It's not part of your respiratory system, okay? Blood vessels are part of your circulatory system. I just have it on here because I want you to see the path of oxygen. Oxygen leaves the alveoli and enters the blood vessels. Okay, and again, like I just mentioned, this is the path of it. One thing that's really important for you to remember, alveoli, this is where your gas exchange happens. Oxygen is absorbed into your blood vessels. Carbon dioxide is doing the opposite. It's leaving the blood and going back up through your trachea and out of your mouth. Cool. And again, we've talked about this. Your trachea is closer to the front of your body. We would say that's anterior, like A-N, not interior, anterior of your body. And again, that epiglottis, thank goodness we have that. when we're eating. It doesn't let food come down my trachea. It does open when I'm not swallowing food, and that's how air is actually able to travel down my trachea. Again, here we can see bronchi. Bronchus is singular version of that word. Okay, and we can see how the bronchi split in the bronchioles, and we can even see some of the little alveoli here. Look at that beautiful diaphragm muscle helping our lungs pump. I shouldn't say pump. Inhale, exhale. Cool. Bronchi, right? The two main branches off of your trachea. Bronchioles split off your bronchi. They're full of mucus. Yummy. Isn't that gross? Okay, you don't need to worry about that though. Another comparison people make with bronchioles, and alveoli, is they think it looks like cauliflower or like broccoli. I kind of tend to agree. Okay. Don't forget about this down here, guys. Again, it's diffusion that's causing the oxygen to absorb into the blood. There's a higher concentration of oxygen in that fresh air than there is in your blood. Particles diffuse from high to low concentration. And we've seen this one already. Okay, here's another graphic. We can see how the arteries and veins are surrounding the alveoli, and oxygen is absorbing into those little red blood cells. And the red blood cells are kind of like the trucks, right? Transporting goods. Look at him go. He's trucking. He's taking oxygen to tissues of our body. We can see how the carbon dioxide, these dark blue circles, are leaving. They're diffusing out of the blood. One more just for fun. Red blood cells. Oxygen is breathed in. There's a high concentration of blood. And it diffuses from high concentration to low concentration into your red blood cells. Okay, another good Amoeba Sisters video. I like these ones. Again, they cover a lot of content. Some of it that we've already covered. Obviously, that's what you should take away. A lot of the other stuff, it's important, but you'll learn it in high school. You don't want to do all the stuff they talk about. Circulatory system. Again, pause it. See if you know what the function is. See if you know what the structures are. All right, function. Just like it says, its function is to circulate blood throughout your body. And it's not just doing that, and rather, it's doing that because blood are the cargo trucks of your body. The blood transports not only the nutrients, but it also transports the oxygen. Nutrients and oxygen are essential to us having energy. Without nutrients, without oxygen, we cannot create energy, and without energy, our tissues die. Okay. The structures of the circulatory system. Obviously, your heart. Your heart is a pump, and that's what's forcing the blood to circulate throughout your body. If your heart stops pumping, your blood stops circulating, and therefore there's no nutrients or oxygen getting to your tissues, and therefore you die. You have blood vessels, and there's three main types: arteries, veins, and capillaries. And lastly, of course, blood. So how does it work? Okay. Well, firstly, your heart is pumping. Thud, 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 thud. And in these diagrams, you'll always notice that there's two different colors. There's red and blue. And firstly, let me address this. There is no blue blood in the human body. There isn't. It's a factoid. It's a fact some people believe, but it's actually wrong. It's not true. The reason all these diagrams show red and blue is just so we can better differentiate between arteries. Arteries are colored red, and veins. Veins are colored blue. And the reason they do that is because arteries carry oxygenated or oxygen-rich blood. Veins carry deoxygenated blood. There's not a lot of oxygen in them. So anyhow, also, you might be thinking like, well, Mr. Lewis, I can see blue veins maybe in your wrist or something. Or like, I don't know, like my grandma's got blue veins. Doesn't that mean the blood is blue? Well, actually, in your skin, you have your pigment of your skin, like the color of your skin, there's something called myelin. And when the light travels through that myelin, it refracts and it makes it look blue. So it's kind of a trick of light, rather than it actually being blue. If you don't believe me, go ahead and Google it. Anyhow, heart pumps. And from your heart, you've got oxygen-rich blood from your lungs. And that oxygen-rich blood goes through your arteries, these red-colored ones here. And as the arteries pump that oxygen-rich blood, oxygen is delivered to your tissues so that those tissues are able to generate energy. Same thing with nutrients from your digestive system. Those nutrients from your digestive system are also circulating throughout your body, being delivered to tissues. As that oxygenated blood reaches the end or extremities, a lot of that oxygen's been delivered, it's been consumed, and now it's deoxygenated. So where's that blood got to go? Well, it's got to get pumped back towards the lungs, through the lungs, where that blood picks up oxygen, goes back through the heart, and then around again. So around and around and around. Oxygenated blood is delivered to the tissues, and then it gets pumped back to the lungs so that it can refill on oxygen and get rid of waste products, which is your carbon dioxide. Okay. On here, when you're reading through this, you'll see that I said you can think of arteries as, let's say, southbound on the QE2 highway, like this. Here's a screenshot of the QE2. Okay. So traveling south, let's say this is an artery. Okay. It's got oxygen blood. It's going to be delivered to tissues. Okay. Once all that oxygen is delivered, the blood, we would say, is deoxygenated. So it's got to go back up northbound to the lungs to get more oxygen. It gets the oxygen, and then it comes back southbound. So you're essentially just doing a lap on the QE2. Notice on the QE2, there are these little side roads that join the blood vessels together. We would say that that's the third type of blood vessel, a capillary. Capillaries are much smaller than arteries and veins, and they connect them together. So that when, let's say, like the blood right here is already deoxygenated, it seeps through and goes back northbound to the lungs to get more oxygen. Okay. And these capillaries, since they're so tiny and small, this is where a lot of that diffusion is happening. Okay. Where oxygen diffuses into tissues, where nutrients diffuse into tissues, and vice versa, where things diffuse back into the bloodstream, like carbon dioxide or any other waste products. And again, one last Amoeba Sisters video. You can watch that on your own time. And I shouldn't say you can. You need to. You need to watch these on your own time. Okay. Now, we've got three systems: digestive, respiratory, and circulatory. How the heck are these all tied together? Well, we've kind of already mentioned that a little bit, but they absolutely are. And we have to keep in mind that these three systems are working together to create energy so that you have energy to grow, to move, to exist and survive. So how are they all tied together? Digestive system provides food, nutrients. Respiratory, oxygen. The food and the oxygen is transported by your circulatory system. To put it in as simple terms as I can, this is it. Food, oxygen, and then it gets transported. So how is oxygen transferred from the respiratory system to the circulatory system? We have talked about this a little bit, but the main thing to remember is the alveoli. This is where we have the gas exchange, okay? Air goes down your trachea, down your bronchi, through your bronchioles, into your alveoli. These little tiny sacs, I think they look kind of like grapes or maybe olives or something, okay? But that oxygen-rich air comes in, and we can see it's colored red. It diffuses into a capillary, into the bloodstream, down here. That blood is absorbed by the red blood cells, which then travel throughout the rest of your body, delivering oxygen. Notice the carbon dioxide that's in these red blood cells as well diffuses out of the bloodstream into the alveoli, up the bronchioli, up the bronchi, up the trachea, and we exhale that. Okay. Here's a little GIF showing that. Again, the red dots, that's oxygen. Okay, the blue dots, that's carbon dioxide. We can see how these red blood cells coming by, they start off as blue, representing that they're deoxygenated. As they start to absorb oxygen coming by, they turn red, representing or symbolizing that they're now oxygenated. Ooh, I don't know what happened to that guy. Get over here. There we go. Sorry about that. This one might be a little bit better for you. Okay. Oh, get out of here. Anyhow, we can see the flow of blood particles coming by. Oxygen is diffusing into the blood. Carbon dioxide is diffusing out of it. Cool. Here's a whole bunch of notes for you to take. Write them all down. Absolutely. This process you will need to know. Word for word, of course not. But you need to be able to explain it. Okay? You need to understand it. What about the circulatory and digestive systems? How does that work? We have talked about this a little bit, but the villi in your small intestine, they're so darn small and there's so much surface area that the broken down nutrients from your food are able to diffuse into these tiny little capillaries, which then circulate those nutrients throughout your body. Okay? And again, think of blood vessels as like a highway, right? Cargo trucks load up on the products and then they drive around and they drop off products. Again, more notes. Pardon me, words are hard apparently. This here, there's a whole bunch of other systems that we're not going to go into detail this year. You'll learn more about this as you continue through your biology careers, okay? But it's important just to at least have an understanding of what they are. Excretory system. I can't talk today. Excretory system sounds kind of like exit, okay? And essentially, this is pee, your urine. It's filtering wastes out of your blood, and then it expels them via urine, okay? So like this is your pee system, essentially, okay? Nervous system, okay? It's made up of nervous tissue or nerve cells, i.e. your brain and your nerves. And its main function is to send and receive signals from tissues in the body. So when I step on a nail, right, that hurts. Nerves send a signal up from my foot, through my body, up into my brain, telling me, ouch, something bad is happening to your foot, so that my brain can send signals down to my muscles and it can make me jerk away from whatever's hurting me, right? Step away from the nail. Nervous system. Reproductive system, this facilitates procreation. Endocrine system, think about your hormones, okay? Your body is full of hormones, and these hormones do a lot of different jobs, which affects your mood. It can affect your growth, right? It affects your metabolism, reproduction, as well as other things. So endocrine, just think like hormones. It's like your hormone system. Immune system, okay? This is your body's ability to fight against bacteria or any pathogen, like something that's going to harm you, okay? Your musculoskeletal system, so muscles, skeletal, your skeleton, okay, so your muscles and your skeleton. Not only does it provide structure, it allows your body to move. In your integumentary system, this is your outer layer. So not only your skin, but hair, nails, glands, like sweat glands, okay? In all of these tissues that combine to make the system, they protect your body from external threats. This looks like a really good matching question on a test. Hint, hint, hint. Cool. I don't know what's going on with my pictures. Sorry about that. Cool. And it's here they are. Okay. So you can see the nervous system. They've got the brain and all the nerves, muscles and skeleton system, excretory system. You can see, right? Because your pee system, pee in the toilet. Reproductive system. This is the symbol for males, symbol for females, right? Reproduction. Endocrine system. We can see a bunch of hormones being absorbed. Respiratory system, we've talked about. Integumentary system, your outer layer. Yada, yada. Cool. Now, this is what we've finally been working up towards. And now that you've gone through all these other slides, you've watched this entire video, you've watched the other videos I posted, and you've completed your follow-along notes, we should be getting an okay understanding of the three systems: digestive, respiratory, and circulatory. And now we're going to represent that understanding, and we're going to extend our understanding through the energy systems product. What the heck are we doing? Well, you are teaching others about the structure and function of those three systems, okay? You need to tell us about their overall function. What does each system do? How is it vital to us being alive? You need to talk about the structure of those systems. So what specific organs are in those systems? And lastly, how do these systems tie in together? And you may have already been thinking this, but we've covered all this in the slideshow. All this information is back in this slideshow waiting for you, okay? How you show this info is up to you. So if you love making dioramas, then boom, do a diorama. If you'd rather, like, I don't know, somehow make a video or write a poem or make a brochure or a pamphlet or a slideshow or something else, right? It's completely up to you. I really don't care how you do it. All I care about is this information being taught. So some random person should be able to come look at your project, whatever it is, but they should be able to look at your project and learn this information from it. That's the most important thing. If you want to, like, make a t-shirt showing the organs of one of the systems, awesome. I don't care really about how you show it. I just care about what you're teaching. Here's how you're being graded. The structures of the systems. Did you include all the organs that you need to? Again, they're listed earlier in this slideshow. Did you talk about the function of each system? What's the educational effectiveness? Are you actually teaching? Can someone look at your project and learn from it? Okay. Also tied into this is how well are you explaining the three systems working together? Okay. Were you creative? Okay. I don't want to, like, disrespect slideshows or whatever. I mean, especially since that's what I'm using to teach you right now. Okay. But they're not super creative. If you really love slideshows, absolutely go ahead and do it. But you're going to have to work extra hard to make it creative. Okay. I encourage you to think more outside the box. Maybe go on Google and see if you can get some ideas or get some inspiration. Okay. And lastly, polish. Okay. Is it neat? Is it organized? Are words spelled correctly? Is it obvious you put some effort into making this look good, or is it showing up with, like, glue hanging off of it and a bunch of rough edges, and you didn't use a ruler to make lines straight? Okay, so it needs to be polished, and that also reflects back on everything else. Its ability to teach. Okay, if it's not neat, it's going to be hard to understand the structures of the systems as well as the functions. Here are some examples. I really like this one. Okay, it's like a body on a poster board, but they've made it like a pop-up. So, like, you open up the ribs, you can see, like, the lungs and the stuff underneath. You can see parts of the digestive system. Very cool. I really like this one. Okay, look, the face is popping off and you can see a skull underneath. That's pretty cool. Here is like a 3D model. Also very cool. Kind of disgusting, but also very cool. Your classic poster board. Okay, here's a t-shirt showing it. That's kind of cool. Okay, something I think I forgot to mention, my bad. We are going to be presenting these projects, okay? I'm not 100% sure how these presentations are going to look. They might be a class presentation. I'm thinking also possibly of, like, doing kind of like a little science fair thing where we do multiple presentations at the same time. We'll see. Either way, though, we are going to be presenting these bad boys. So not only do a good job on your project, but learn what these systems are. What structures make the systems? What's the function? What's the job of the systems? How do they work together? Understand this. And it's going to take some work, guys. Watching this video and going through the slides once, it's probably not enough. You're going to have to dedicate some time really thinking about it and studying it and really interacting with this material. You can't just watch it once and expect to know it. You can't. You got to really dig into it and put forth solid effort, because nothing worse than working really hard and making a beautiful project, and then you go to the presentation on March 11th and you don't know how to even pronounce the words. Not a good look, right? And there's no way you're going to get full marks if that's how your presentation looks, okay? Obviously, we're going to stop here. We're not going to worry about topic 7 just yet, okay? And that's topic 6. So thanks for going through this whole video. This was a long, long, long one. I really appreciate your guys' focus. Thanks for putting in finishing your follow along notes. Thanks for working with your study guides. And thank you for the effort you're about to put into this topic to learn more about our human body. Thanks, guys. Bye for now.